follow the news. Trump, what's happening, how it's going to
Always
affect.
drama with Trump.
Every day there's news now.
Yeah. Do you see the list of the tariff? He just
Yeah.
Well, I've only seen the UK. I've been quite detached from it all.
Yeah,
recently,
the UK is just 10%, so he's
we got
increased
off lightly.
tariffs from China.
Did Nigeria get tariffs?
Yeah, 14%.
Wow.
What was it? Sorry.
14.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Nigeria got away lightly.
Yeah.
But what
South
did you
Africa
think?
30%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he pulled out this big board and
Yeah,
China,
exactly. And then
He
China
loves-
yeah,
loves the
European
performance.
Union.
it's just absurd. Like,
Yeah.
But I was wondering because he said, this is retaliation, but he calls it kind retaliation. He says he's looking at the tariffs that they're putting on America, and he's putting half. And he was saying tariffs and also adjusted currency. And I was thinking, how do we check this? Because they're saying 67%
67%,
China.
Yeah.
But who's checking these figures?
So what he did was he looked at the deficit between the US and China, right? The trade deficit between the US and China, and picked the deficit, trade deficit between US, what US exports and imports from China. He picked the deficit and divided it by US imports from China. So it's almost like the trade gap between US and China is what he used to define the tariffs. And then when he did that, he got 67%, and then he divided it by 2, so 34% or thereabout. That's what was allocated to China, which is a very, I don't know if I can say this, ridiculous way of implementing tariffs. Like, how do you, and first of all, on the other side where you saw he said China's tariff on US goods is somewhere around 6-7%. And then he said something about currency manipulation. So subjective. Like, there is no real way of measuring this in terms of how does this really work. And mind you, what happens to a country where you have a trade surplus with? They still also got a tariff. The UK, 10%.
And the UK didn't get half. They got the same amount, 10%.
10%, the baseline 10%. And then the real problem is, I don't know the thinking behind some of this. And you can never, there's no country in the world that you can't have trade surplus with all your trade partners. It's not possible. You would certainly have cases where you export more, you import more from different countries. It doesn't have to be, I want surplus, and then you do the math, and then you calculate, if I raise tariff, I'm going to get XYZ billion dollars to fund deficit. Is that all?
Yeah.
It's just a lot of things are missing. I think that rigorous thinking is missing in all of this process.
Yeah, he loves the the headlines.
Exactly.
You saw how happy he was to just be smiling with that board.
Yeah. And then there's some phrases he uses. Is it make America wealthy again, make America rich again? I just don't know. Like, so I think it just means we're in an era where, look, uncertainty is
sky high.
Like, sky high. So if you run a business, you're a government, you're just thinking, what do I do with all of this, right?
Because you can't really, there's no long-term strategy when you don't know what.
No. And in fact, one of the things he's looking out for, and one of the primary objective of all of this is, and he said it many times, he wants to bring in investors into the US. He wants those countries to come back to invest, in the country. But the thing is, people don't just make investment decisions like that. I mean, how would you imagine shutting down a whole factory?
Plant in
Asia. You want to move to the US, and then Trump is there for 4 years. What happens when he's gone? Like, so people, I think the options are like, companies are like, do we just live on with this tariff and pass on the cost to consumers? Or, I mean, how easy is it? Are we going to relocate to our plants to the US? It's not an easy business decision, right? So I think many people are just super worried. The market is showing that today. All
stocks are tumbling
red.
Yeah.
You're just wondering,
where is this going?
Where is this going? Yeah.
Aren't one of the issues that you need more of a concerted effort to sort of bring industry back?
Yeah.
It isn't just going to come from tariffs. There hasn't been a lot of talk about what is he going to do on the ground to sort of facilitate that.
Yeah. And on that, I think, in fact, many African countries also did something similar, where you focus more on the trade policy itself. But then there are a lot of other things that you need to do, the homework of making your business environment competitive, issues relating to infrastructure, skills. You want to invest, you want people to bring investment. Where's the labor force? I don't know if you remember was it the Apple CEO, one of the former CEOs, he said when they were deciding on some of their production and they were looking for engineers, right? In the US, they could only get like certain type of engineers to fill a room like this. But in
Wow.
China, they got like a
Truckload.
football field, lots of engineers, to be able to do the work. And so you can imagine the skills requirement that it would take for someone to move a plant, from a country like China or somewhere in East Asia to the US. So all of those groundwork, right, has to be in place, or there has to be preparations for that to happen.
But
So
that's
it's not just
surprising,
tariff.
though,
Yeah.
that a country like America wouldn't have those engineers and China has. And I wonder if everyone talks about there's a downfall to the West, a downfall of America. Is maybe a drastic move like these tariffs is what is needed to bring back those engineers? Maybe it's to say, hey, we need to figure out a way that maybe Trump is thinking to bring back, manufacturing here. We need to have skilled labor here. And this is his way of saying, hey, we're making a drastic turn now and everything else will follow. Because if they keep going down the path they've been going, maybe they're going to have less and less engineers and it's just going to go downhill. So maybe this is his way of bringing things back.
Well, I think he has to do the work. He doesn't, to be honest, it's not just about tariff, right? So he has to really do the work then, if that's it. So I think the point here is, he said that his favorite word in the dictionary is tariff, right? And so it has to go beyond that to do the groundwork of investing in areas like, skills development, infrastructure, and in fact, preparing even more for the impact of this tariff, because what you find most times is when it's the consumers that would often bear the brunt of all of this. I mean, sometimes in some cases, even the producers, the farmers. Remember in 2018, some of the soybeans farmers in the US had to deal with the negative impact of same Trump's tariff as well, and the retaliation from China. And so if there are no concerted efforts, beyond just tariff itself, I don't think that's enough to attract the kind of investments that he needs or create the kind of impact that he needs, that he wants to see. Yeah. So you have to, for instance, inflation numbers will start going up as a result of this tariff. I mean, it's certain in the US. It's almost inevitable, and not just in the US, everywhere else. So global inflation likely to go up, and that also has implication. Central banks across the world have been trying to reduce interest rates, right, to bring them down. Given the impact of the war in Ukraine and all of that. But with this uncertainty that's happening now, most of them would almost like hold rates, or the next step could even be raising rates to control inflation. And of course, that has impact on your mortgage, credit card, and all of those other things. So I struggle to see the positive impact, at least for now. Maybe in the long term, who knows? But all of those things needs to be put in place. It's not just tariff.
And the global south, because we can say this will be detrimental for the US, but I mean, some of these global south countries, a lot of their exports are to the US, and their markets are going to be like severely impacted because they can't access such a large market. I think places like Cambodia, Vietnam, or South Korea even, which are a bit more, a lot more developed, but they really rely on having access to that market. Or, well, they still have access, but it's not as lucrative as it once was. So how do you see this playing out with a lot of these countries who are very reliant on exporting to the US?
Well, I think because the tariffs are not, it's not uniform across countries, so the rates are different. So in some cases, you could find where you could find a case where countries are almost like competing in a way to still grab a share of the US market, because we're talking about the $27 trillion economy, the largest consumer market in the world, and consumer of so many goods, cars, electronics, pharmaceuticals, and co. So I think the US is still an important market, but for the global south, so imagine you're hit with a tariff of, say 25%, and your neighboring country is 10%. There is that likelihood that there could be more investment in countries with lower tariffs, relatively lower tariff, and then they would seek to export more to the US. So because importing from a country with 25% tariff obviously makes goods more expensive. So if there are alternatives, and we saw that even playing out in the last episode where he also raised tariff. This time it was the US and China. And then we saw some of those investments moving to some of these countries, Vietnam, South Korea, and the likes. And in fact, their export to the US increased as a result of that. So you could see that mild competition playing out this time because, again, it's not uniform, even though there's the baseline tariff of 10%. But there's still some additional tariff. Like China, for instance, got 34% tariff, other countries as well. So because it's not even, what I see playing out is countries trying to take advantage of that and still export more to the US. So, yeah, but still, constricted trade environment. I think that's the message in the next perhaps 1 year or two.